Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Review Show, episode 3, and we got another jam-packed episode for you guys this week. We actually have 7 reviews we're going to do today. We're going to be talking about Twisters, Deadpool 1 and 2 and their 4K Blu-rays, Cold in July on Blu-ray, Return to Paradise on Blu-ray, and we're also going to have our director's reviews for the month of July. We're going to have Frank Rodriguez, who chose for me to review The Bay from 2012, and Mr. Smelly Potato, who wanted me to review Nightcrawler from 2014. And we're going to start it off with this week's new release that actually was a big deal at the box office, made more money than the 1996 original, and that movie is Twisters. This one was directed by Lee Isaac Chung, when the first one was directed by John Nabant, who also directed Speed, and I love Twister from 1996. Not as much as I love Speed, but you know what? Going to see Twisters in theaters, I was really excited about it. I love Glenn Powell. I think he's actually one of our big up-and-coming stars. He was great earlier this year in Hitman, which you guys can watch on Netflix right now. Really a vehicle for him to show off his acting chops. While this, it's a real ensemble cast like the original Twister, but he really stands out in this movie, Glenn Powell, and so does his co-star, Daisy Edgar-Jones. The two of them have great chemistry in this movie, and it's a very similar plot to the original Twister. It's a summer blockbuster, the kind of movie you want to go and see on the biggest screen possible. I saw it in Adobe Theater. You can see it in Adobe Theater and IMAX. Go see it in 4DX. Really experience this on the big screen because the special effects, just like the original, are front and center. It has a very similar plot to the original movie where we have this big new thing that is supposed to, in the original one we had the Dorothy, which can give us information on the tornado. We see the Dorothy in this movie in the very, very beginning, and you saw it in the trailers, but that's not the big part of this movie. Now instead we have something that could possibly collapse a tornado, save some lives. We have to get that working. At the very beginning of this movie, we see Daisy Edgar-Jones and her character. She's working with a different team. Something ends up happening. We cut to a few years later. She's working at a different job now. She's not living in Oklahoma. She's not chasing tornadoes anymore. But something pulls her back. And that's where she gets introduced to the Tornado Wrangler, played by Glenn Powell in this movie. And again, he is just a star in this movie. He's so much fun on this scene. He's so much fun on the screen. He's just having a blast. And like I said, him and Daisy Edgar-Jones, they just have great chemistry. You actually care about the two characters, the two main lead characters, but all the supporting characters are really good as well. You get Anthony
Chasers out of Arkansas.
Hillbillies with a YouTube channel.
This movie a lot of people remember from In the Heights or from the Transformers movie from last year. He's fine. I have never loved him. I've always felt like, he's a plug-and-play kind of guy. You can replace him, and I don't think you'll notice him missing from the movie. He's fine in the movie, but your two leads are really what stand out. I never expected to get emotional at a Twister movie. But this movie got me. There's a scene late in the movie, like just before the big third act happens, and one character delivers a monologue. And I swear to God, I teared up, and I never had Twisters making me tear up in 2024, my bingo card, but here we are. It's just that good of a movie. It's a movie that I just had a lot of fun in theaters. Will it play as well at home? We'll have to see, because I'm getting this 4K Blu-ray day one. I didn't expect Twisters to be one of my favorite movies of 2024, but it really is, and I just think it's a movie we don't get that much anymore. It feels like a 90s summer blockbuster. It's somebody who loves blockbusters, going to the movies in the summer, getting out of that summer heat, going into the air condition, drinking ice cold soda pop and popcorn and everything like that. Love doing all that stuff, and Twisters is the kind of movie you go to the movie theater to see. It's not something that's supposed to be very thought-provoking, but yet it does have some thought-provoking moments. This is a kind of movie where there's country music playing while blasting through the speakers while they're chasing a tornado. It's so much fun. I just had a blast in the movies now. I went with Matt, my cousin Matt. He didn't like the movie as much as me, and I wonder if a lot of people felt this way as well. I personally didn't, is that, it didn't feel like a direct sequel to 1996's Twister. These are all original characters. Yes, there's Easter eggs mixed in there, but if you're somebody who wants to see like those characters from the original one, you might be disappointed like he was, and I'm very curious to see, what do you guys think of Twisters? Let me know in the comments section below. And we're also here today to talk about Deadpool 1 and 2 with Deadpool Wolverine coming out this upcoming weekend. I thought no better time than now to revisit the first two movies that came out in 2016 and 2018. And we'll also talk a little bit about these 4K Blu-rays. But I didn't give a score to Twisters. How would I rate Twisters on a score of 1 to 10? I would actually give Twisters I was between an 8.5 and a 9, but I'm going to go with my heart. It's been a few days since I saw it. I'm going to give Twisters a 9 out of 10. But now let's kick it back and let's talk a little bit about Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine is definitely the most anticipated movie of 2024. At my regular Joe job, I've been talking to people. They're really excited to see Deadpool and Wolverine. These are people who do not care about movies. I tell them all the time, I go to the movies every single week. None of them want to see it, but families are going to see Deadpool and Wolverine, and all that has to be credited to the original 2 Deadpool movies. The first time we ever saw Deadpool in film was in Wolverine, the original Wolverine Origins movie that came out. That actually led to a pretty decent trilogy with, the second Wolverine movie, and then, of course, Logan. But still, Ryan Reynolds loved the character of Deadpool. He wanted to really make the merc with the mouth. This is a very meta character, one who doesn't shut the fuck up. Ryan Reynolds was perfectly cast in the original Wolverine, but they silenced him, and then, of course, he really wanted to make his own Deadpool movie. They made a 2-minute clip for Fox that actually sat there for a long time. They weren't going to make the movie. Then finally somebody leaked that clip online and just got fans interested in the movie. It's a very similar clip to what you actually see in the movie Deadpool, which is great as well. And the original Deadpool then came out in theaters, directed by Tim Miller, and this really was a Ryan Reynolds showpiece. He's perfect as Deadpool, but everybody in the movie is great. It's a lot of meta jokes, a lot of calling out the X-Men movies, especially 20th Century Fox, and how, in both Deadpool 1 and 2, the only real X-Men we see are Colossus and Megasonic Teenage Warhead, which is a great name, and I love that they keep calling out how great of a name that is throughout the movies and how Ryan Reynolds loves her. And, Deadpool himself, he's just like Wolverine. He can't die, but again, he just can't shut the fuck up. He's pretty much, he's not an emotionless human being, but he's always making jokes at the wrong time and making a joke out of everything. And I think that's why I connect to him, because one thing I've always been accused of in my personal life is, I don't take things too seriously. I'm always making jokes, and that's just kind of how I am. Even when I'm uncomfortable in a sad situation, I'm always there to crack a joke or two. And I get that sometimes that might be a little bit like, bad timing on things, but, in the worst situations, I'm always there to crack a joke and, try and lighten the mood. And so I can always relate to Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds' performance as Deadpool, both in 1 and 2. The original Deadpool, he says it's a love story. It came out on Valentine's Day, and I saw it on Valentine's Day with my wife, and it really is a love story, and you end up caring about the romance between Wade Wilson and Vanessa, or as he likes to call her, Nessa, in these movies. And then, of course, he gets cancer. He goes through the same program that Wolverine went through, basically bringing out those mutant powers, and now he can't die. He can't die from cancer, but he also, he lost a lot in that. He looks burnt. He looks disheveled. He looks like an avocado. And the movie itself, it's got all these meta jokes. It's so funny, and it was a mega hit. And, it was a shorter movie, under 2 hours. And then, of course, it got greenlit for a sequel in 2018. And I actually think that the sequel, Deadpool 2, is better than the original Deadpool, in my opinion. This time it's more of a tragedy what ends up happening to Vanessa's character and how Deadpool has to deal with that. He can't kill himself because he just won't die. So, he tries to join the X-Men. So he becomes an X-Men trainee at that point. Then, of course, it ends up leading to him end up going to a mutant prison, which they put a collar around his neck. And now he can't freaking just superpowers. And, of course, now the cancer's back. He's dying of that, which is, I think, the real low point of Deadpool 2 is when they're in this prison. But once they get out of that prison and he forms the X-Force, and we have that great scene of the X-Force team assembling. Feels like a 1980s scene. I absolutely love that. And then, of course, what happens to all of those characters in the next scene is one of the funniest scenes in movie history. Go! I think Deadpool 2 overall is a funnier movie than the original Deadpool. Now, Deadpool 1 might have a better, more constructed story. It's the first time we're seeing Deadpool on the big screen, so you can only get it once. But I think overall, I actually enjoyed Deadpool 2. I'm a big comedy guy, and watching a superhero do all this stuff and be a satire of superhero movies, it's perfect. And Ryan Reynolds, nobody else can play Deadpool like Ryan Reynolds. This is the perfect role for him. I've seen Ryan Reynolds try and do serious roles like Safe House. I don't think it necessarily works. But in the Deadpool franchise, he is perfectly cast as Deadpool, and I can never imagine anybody else doing it. That's why I cannot wait to see what him and Hugh Jackman can do with Deadpool and Wolverine. And the origins of Deadpool is that they kind of imagined it like twins. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger is Wolverine, while Deadpool is Danny DeVito, the old wisecracking guy, whereas Arnold Schwarzenegger, the more serious guy. So finally getting to see him team up in Deadpool and Wolverine is something I just cannot wait to do. Now, what about these 4K Blu-rays? Deadpool, the first one, is a very early 4K Blu-ray that came out in 2016. It's got a 2-disc set in here. You get the Blu-ray and the 4K Blu-ray. I had actually owned the previous Blu-ray for a very long time. I didn't pick up this 4K Blu-ray until about 2 years ago when it was on sale. So the Blu-ray that's packed in there, and the reason why is it's an old 4K Blu-ray, and I didn't expect the biggest jump from Blu-ray to 4K Blu-ray. And I was correct in that. The Blu-ray, when you watch it, it's a really good Blu-ray, but when you go to 4K Blu-ray, only HDR10, but you do get a Dolby Atmos track, is that it brightens everything up. And that's really what you're only going to notice, is that the Blu-ray is just darker than the 4K Blu-ray. But, of course, we're going to sharpen it up a little bit like that, but it's not going to be the biggest jump in the world from Blu-ray to 4K Blu-ray. Even the extras are really good. You'll find them all on that Blu-ray. The only extra on the 4K Blu-ray is the commentary track. And actually, that's the same thing with Deadpool 2. All of your extras will be on the second Blu-ray. Now, the thing with Deadpool 2 that's pretty interesting is this is a 4-disc set, which is really awesome because we get that super duper uncut version, which I personally do not like for Deadpool 2. I prefer the theatrical cut. They just change around certain jokes very similar to what Anchorman did, and I don't think those changes necessarily work for the movie. There's one early in the movie where, he sees a guy naked and he sees his crotch and he's like, Scoutmaster Kevin, which is a very dark joke, but I thought it was funny. That joke is swapped around for a different joke in the uncut version. Now, the uncut version has, you've probably seen it, where Deadpool's dressed like Bob Ross. That's only in the uncut version. You get some added scenes, a little bit more blood and violence, but I still think that it's a better cut to watch the theatrical version. But you can watch both versions in Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray, but the only place you're going to find extras is on Disc 1 with the audio commentary track, and then Disc 2 will have all of your regular extras. And the extras are very similar, but I think Deadpool 1 had better extras. There's a making of documentary that's about an hour and 20 minute long, but then both movies have, gag reels, deleted scenes, so you get plenty of extras on both of them, which I did appreciate. I just thought the Deadpool 1 overall had the better extras, even though it's just a regular plain Jane kind of set, whereas Deadpool 2, they kind of brought out the bells and whistles. And one thing about both Deadpool 1 and 2, when you go into their Blu-rays and 4K Blu-rays, is the menu system. I personally always like a creative menu system, like what Fight Club did, how it kind of starts out Never Been Kissed before it changes to Fight Club. Whereas with this movie, it kind of feels like the Fight Club opening, it kind of feels like the Fight Club menu system. We see Deadpool putting a chimichanga in the microwave with Deadpool 1. That's pretty cool. But then Deadpool 2 is kind of like an late 80s, early 19s VHS kind of thing with Take On Me playing over it. And it's a little bit warped because the VHS is warped, and that's the menu system you go into. Love that little attention to detail. So I thought that both 4K Blu-rays for Deadpool 1 and 2, they're not great. Like, even the Dolby Atmos tracks, they're not something that's going to blow you away on both movies. Even the visuals, they're not the biggest jump from Blu-ray to 4K Blu-ray. They're 2016 and 2018 4K Blu-rays respectively, and I just think, because they're shot with modern cameras, when you go from the Blu-ray to the 4K Blu-ray, that HDR10, yes, it does a little bit of work, but it's not the biggest jump in the world. So if you do have just the Blu-rays and you've thought about getting the 4K Blu-rays, if you're like me, you're just going to get them anyway, just because, you're kind of a little bit of a quality snob and you want to see it anyway. But my personal recommendation to you guys is you do not need to go to the 4K Blu-rays for both Deadpool 1 and 2. Just grab the Blu-rays if you have them, but if you feel like you need to upgrade, I'm telling you, you're going to be slightly disappointed because you're not really getting much of an upgrade. Those Blu-rays are pretty solid. You will notice a difference, but it's not going to be the biggest jump in the world. And how would I rate both 4K Blu-rays? I would give Deadpool 1's 4K Blu-ray an 8.5 out of 10, while I would give Deadpool 2's 4K Blu-ray also an 8.5 out of 10, because I do feel like they put a good amount of effort into them. And, in 2016 and 2018, they actually do hold up pretty well. But hey, let me know what you guys are thinking of Deadpool and Wolverine coming out this weekend. And what do you guys think of the Deadpool 1 and 2 films and their 4K Blu-rays? And next up, we are going to do our director reviews. And we're going to start off with Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews Choice. And this month, he wanted me to watch The Bay. This is a 2012 found footage film mockumentary directed by Barry Levinson, the guy who directed Rain Man and also directed The Natural, one of my favorite baseball movies of all time. So he's directed some great 1980s movies. But this does not feel like the same guy who directed those movies. This is a great movie, though, and I cannot believe this one slipped by me. It's probably because I don't really watch too many found footage movies, although I do enjoy a good mockumentary, and Frank recommended to me a gem with this one, because it almost kind of feels like what happens like with a pandemic or an outbreak that happens, And I don't want to spoil too much because I went into this movie completely blind, didn't look up what the plot was about, so I just went into it and I didn't even realize it was a found footage movie other than what Frank said to me. And he's like, "You're gonna love it," and I absolutely did, because in the beginning of this movie, we're kind of introduced to a small town in Maryland. They're talking about their drinking water and how they have this plant that, is able to filter the water. I actually worked for a water filtration company selling water filters at one point, so I kind of know how this stuff works. And, you'd be surprised what's actually in your drinking water. You can look all this stuff up online. There is a database that shows you what's in your drinking water, and you can test it. So I found this stuff very fascinating, because unfortunately, this drinking water, it's polluted with a lot of stuff, some of the worst stuff in the country. And this kind of leads to an outbreak, like a disease, a virus that is, it's killing people. And I'm not going to go too far into that because things get really scary. They give you the reasoning for all this. You get to see all the actors. These aren't really like well-trained, great actors. There's some times where the dialogue will be a little bit cheesy and you can tell that they're actors trying to act like real people. And, that's something that's kind of also part of the charm of found footage films, is that, these are regular people. They're supposed to feel like regular people. Like the guy who plays the mayor, he kind of at certain points feels like how a mayor would feel. Like he's kind of faking everything he's saying. He doesn't truly believe what he's saying. And at other points, he's just being naive and he's scared and he doesn't exactly know what's going on. He doesn't realize how out of control things have gotten. There's also a very Return of the Living Dead aspect to this. Where, if you remember the Return of the Living Dead and how it ends, more realistic, obviously. That's what they were going for with this approach. And it's a very, it's actually a pretty damn scary movie that will get under your skin, and it really stuck with me for days, especially the very end of this movie and the reasoning for everything. Really didn't see that coming. There's a great scene like kind of on a boardwalk where we end up in like in a bunch of small little areas or like shop buildings and everything like that. I've been to Maryland and it felt very much like Ocean City, Maryland. It's not Ocean City, but it felt like it, and how I've been there and how it actually felt being there. And man, it really is scary. And I think, that realistic approach, the found footage approach, worked perfectly for this type of movie. Now it has a Blu-ray, but from what I understand, it's only a Region B Blu-ray, so this is the kind of movie that needs to come to 4K Blu-ray, or at least give us a Region A Blu-ray for the people who want to check this out in the United States, because it's the kind of movie that definitely deserves it. And if you haven't seen The Bay, I could definitely recommend it. And I would give The Bay a score of 1 to 10. I would give The Bay actually a really solid 8 out of 10. I thought this movie was fantastic, and it's definitely worth your time. And then Mr. Smelly Potato wanted me to review Nightcrawler. Now, I had actually already seen Nightcrawler from 2014, directed by David Gilroy. This is kind of the first movie that pops in my head, other than Bubble Boy, when I think of Jake Gyllenhaal for some reason. I just thought that he gave a great performance, and this is the kind of performance that Jake Gyllenhaal can really sink his teeth into. I believe this Jake Gyllenhaal more than I believe Roadhouse Jake Gyllenhaal, or even Southpaw Jake Gyllenhaal. Somebody who's like very swarmy and just a weird dude. In this movie, he plays somebody who wants to eventually become what they call a stringer. Basically, what a stringer is somebody who is trying to get footage of certain things that happen, whether it be a car accident, a shooting, a stabbing, basic stuff where even Bill Paxton says in this movie, if it bleeds, it leads. It's kind of dealing with our obsession with the media and, how we only like negative news and not positive news. Unfortunately, as a society, as a human beings, we like to see people die, whether we admit it or not, but those stories are always leading it. We like negative news more than we like positive news. Bad news is always good news because it always drags ratings. So, of course, seeing, these violent things happen, then, hey, they're just talking about these people like they're not real people. And Jake Gyllenhaal, he's ambitious. He wants to start his own company, and he sees something like this that he could just sink his teeth into. He sees what Bill Paxton is doing. He's been in this field for 14 years. Bill Paxton, always good in whatever movie he's in. David Gilroy's married to Renee Russo. Renee Russo's in this movie as well. Love seeing her. You don't really see her too much anymore. It's fun to see her again in this movie. This movie also features Riz Ahmed. Really, this was his breakout role that kind of eventually led to 5 years later, Sound of Metal, which he was fantastic in that movie as well. But he's great in this movie, kind of working underneath Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal, the way he speaks, it kind of feels like, he's got very bad social skills, but he's very direct. He'll tell you everything you need to know and everything he knows. It just comes off very arrogant. It's because he basically kind of says in the movie he doesn't like people, and he feels like he's the smartest guy in the room, and he just kind of wants to try and get his message across, but it comes off very rude, and it comes off very like, I know more than you, and you should respect me, even though I haven't earned this respect yet. He kind of just tries to plug himself into this field and, basically take it over. And I'm not going to spoil what happens in this movie, but the third act It's pretty damn shocking, but yet I guess you're not surprised knowing what this character was, especially when you watch this multiple times, who this character of Jake Gyllenhaal is and what he's actually striving for and what he actually thinks of people. You shouldn't be too surprised at how this movie ends, but I mean, the first time I saw it, it really did shock me, and I think it's one of the reasons why this movie holds up so well, and it's only aged better because of how we feel about the media now 10 years later and what they go for. So yeah, if you kind of have some issues with the media and how they, construct stories, watch a movie like this, or something like broadcast news from the 80s when they had a little bit more integrity. Things have changed with TMZ and everything like that. In the 24-hour news cycle, things are not the same anymore. This movie illustrates that perfect. And then you have people like Jake Gyllenhaal. There's real people out there like that. So I really think it's a very well done movie. It's got a great score. It looks great. This movie actually was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards. It didn't win it, but you know what? It is a very well constructed screenplay. And this is a great movie that if you haven't seen, definitely check it out. The Blu-ray was a little bit expensive. That's why I didn't grab it. And I'm very surprised that this hasn't come to 4K Blu-ray. If you guys go back 10 years in 2014, people loved Nightcrawler. They were really calling this Jake Gyllenhaal's best performance. And it's weird. It's one of those movies like another movie that came out around the same time, Birdman, that people just don't talk about anymore. And I'm very confused as to why. It's a very, very, very good, well-made movie. And at the center of it, you get a great Jake Gyllenhaal performance. And then 3 great supporting roles in Riz Ahmed, Bill Paxton, and Rene Russo. So I'm very shocked that not many more people talk about this movie. But if you're one of those people who haven't seen Nightcrawler, I could definitely recommend it. And I would give Nightcrawler a really solid 8 out of 10. The same score as I would give The Bay. I think they're great movies. But they're not the greatest movies. They're definitely something you can go back to every few years. The Bay, though, I think might actually get a higher score as time goes on because I really did enjoy that movie. And Nightcrawler, I want to see it on 4K Blu-ray because it does also have a pretty good score to it. And now the last 2 movies we're going to talk about this week are 2 movies sent in to me from Kevin Kruger. I believe we only have 3 movies left after this week, but this week he wanted me to review Cold in July, which is a great thriller, and Return to Paradise that, we were talking about Mill Creek not too long ago. This is a Mill Creek Blu-ray that he sent me. It's a double pack, and, obviously I only checked out Return to Paradise. I had actually never seen both of these movies. And we'll start it off with Cold in July, directed by Jim Mickle, and this has a stacked cast starring Michael C. Hall, Sam Shepard, the late Sam Shepard, and of course, Don Johnson. And out of all 3 of these actors, Don Johnson clearly had the best time on set. He had a role that he could have a lot of fun with. The clothes he's wearing, it feels like the old Don Johnson. Many people, like myself, will always associate him with Miami Vice, but he's actually been a great actor as years have gone on, like with movies like Django Unchained. People just kind of forget that it's Don Johnson. Miami Vice, Don Johnson. Somebody who loves the 80s and Miami Vice, of course, I just love seeing Don Johnson. But Michael C. Hall, another person most known for, TV show, that's Dexter. And he plays a very different character from Dexter. Dexter's very confident in himself. The character he plays in this movie, Michael C. Hall, is not confident in himself. And this movie, I thought it was going to be very simple. I felt like, okay, this is going to be a very Cape Fear type of movie. At the beginning of this movie, Michael C. Hall's house is getting robbed. He's got a gun. He kills the guy. He defends his house. This movie takes place in 1980s Texas. So it feels pretty damn hot while you're watching it. And, that really shook him. He's not that kind of person who was willing to do that. Now, even the cops say, I was surprised to see it was you that did this. And then, of course, Sam Shepard, he was the dad of this guy who got killed. He just recently got paroled. And he's basically stalking his family. And they get really scared. And I thought, okay, wow, so this is going to be a Cape Fear type of situation. And then, you know what? Sometime in the second act, we make a hard left turn away from that. This is the definition of a noir movie because the way this movie starts and how it ends, you would not believe it. And I don't want to spoil any more than that. Just see Cold in July. Listen to me on that. Because they make a really hard left turn when Don Johnson's character shows up. And they really start to peel away more layers to the story. Because what seemed like a very simple Cape Fear type of story ends up starting as Cape Fear and ending like Rolling Thunder. So if you know how Rolling Thunder ended, and if you're trying to wonder how he got there, watch the movie. It's a fantastic movie. The Blu-ray actually even has some extras on it, which I appreciate, which is very different than Road to Paradise. Not the greatest of extras, but you know what? Some damn good extras on here that you could definitely sink your teeth into. For a movie like this that just kind of feels like, hey, it's an IFC film, let's get it out there. They didn't have to put any extras on there, but they did. The visual quality is not the greatest in my opinion. It's kind of got that like white haze over everything like a lot of independent horror films did in the early 2010s, and I've just never been a big fan of that look. But other than that, the 1980s look, I really think they captured it with the old police cars, the hairstyles. Like Michael C. Hall has a really shitty mullet throughout this entire movie. The clothes that Don Johnson is wearing, like I was saying earlier, just absolutely absolutely love that. It's exactly what you would expect him to wear. And the movie unravels just into a great film with 3 great performances. Everybody in the lead roles does a phenomenal job. The Blu-ray is great, so I could definitely recommend to you guys Cold in July. And if I was going to give Cold in July a score of 1 to 10, I would actually give Cold in July a 8.5 out of 10. I had a blast with that movie. And yeah, it's a summer movie, so definitely check this one out in July. Great recommendation, Kevin. Thank you so much, and thank you for sending me that Blu-ray. And then the last review of the week is going to be Road to Paradise.
Fuck is wrong with you?
And this movie came out in 1998, stars Vince Vaughn, Anne Heck, and Joaquin Phoenix. Anne Heck and Vince Vaughn also appeared in the Gus Van Sant Psycho remake that very same year, so they pop up in this movie. They share some scenes together. That's pretty cool, because Anne Heck plays a lawyer in this movie. At the beginning of this movie, we see 3 friends, including Vince Vaughn and Joaquin Phoenix. They're, on vacation together. They buy some hash. Joaquin Phoenix and the other guy, they leave. They head out of there. They go back to New York. It's 2 years later. Anne Heck finds Sheriff, who is Vince Vaughn's character. He's a limo driver at this point. And she's like, what's happened to your buddy Joaquin Phoenix since you guys left that Malaysian company? Well, left that Malaysian country. Well, they found the hash, even though they were just smoking it, but they said it was so much of it because it was apparently really cheap there. Well, they arrested him. He's been in prison for over 2 years. And if you guys, the 2 of you, do not go back to Malaysia and accept your responsibility for being there with him and also buying it with him and receiving a 3-year sentence, then they're gonna hang him. And that's really what this movie is about. So they have about 6 days or 7 days to decide, do we want to go back, upend our lives? The one guy is getting married. The thing about Vince Vaughn's character is he really has nothing. He's just kind of somebody. He's a limo driver. That's it. He's got no relationship. The other guy's engaged to get married, and he's the most willing to go back, because how do you sleep at night knowing that your friend, your supposed best friend, is about to be hung for something that all 3 of you guys did? Now, given he had the opportunity to leave as well, he chose not to because he kind of wanted to help out the orangutans, which is, something I would expect Joaquin Phoenix to do. And Joaquin Phoenix in 1998, you know what? He had the chops already. A lot of people kind of cling on to movies like Gladiator as his big breakout performance, but he was also working in the 1980s. I mean, this is the guy who was the brother of River Phoenix, and his name was Leaf Phoenix when you go back to the movies like Parenthood. And, he's always kind of been like a little bit of a weird guy, and his performance in here, it's a little bit strange, but it makes sense. This is a guy who's been in a Malaysian prison for over 2 years, just suffering, and he's about to die, so of course he would be acting strange, and he does a great job, Joaquin Phoenix. Vince Vaughn, Vince Vaughn's most known for his comedy. In the late 90s, he was trying all these dramatic roles like Psycho or Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World of Jurassic Park. But, of course, he's a comedian actor. That's what people are always going to know him for. But he does a pretty good job, especially how this movie ends. Again, another shocking ending. Very similar to the ending, in my opinion, to the movie Paths of Glory. Both very shocking, sad endings that you hope wouldn't come. You don't want to believe it's going to come, but then it does come. And everybody gives a great performance, including Anne Heck, who recently passed away about 2 years ago. But people seem to forget, the late 90s, she was huge. She really was a big-time actress. A lot of people also talk about her personal life and being, in a relationship with Ellen DeGeneres at the time. But still, she was on the big screen all the time. She really had the acting chops. Vince Vaughn actually shows dramatic chops in this. Joaquin Phoenix is good. He's always good. And, that plot, it's a great thriller. And yet you really spend some time with these characters. And I think they do a great job fleshing out the characters, their reasoning for doing what they're doing. And then you get a great third act. And that's all you can really ask for a movie like this. It does have a pretty low point, I would say, in the second act before we finally get to the third act that I think kind of drags this movie down. Overall, the cinematography is also, it feels like the late 1990s cinematography, kind of like what you would expect from a movie like this. It doesn't stand out or anything. Same thing with the score. It just doesn't stand out or anything, but it's still a good movie, one that you definitely should check out, that I can definitely recommend. And I would give Return to Paradise a solid 7.5 out of 10. And thank you so much, Kevin, for sending me in those movies. We'll have 2 more reviews for you guys next week for the Kevin Kruger Blu-ray reviews. Thank you so much, buddy. And thank you, everybody else. Thank you to my channel directors, Mr. Smelly Potato and Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, for sending me in those director reviews. I really enjoyed them this month. And if you guys want to become a friend of the channel, a producer like John Doe Juggalo and Jason Martin, or a director like Frank and Mr. Smelly Potato, you guys can do that, because we do have channel memberships with all different perks. So you can look for that in the description below. Got no money to throw away, guys? We don't mind at all. All we hope is that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, try and like it, subscribe, share the video, maybe get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. But if you can't do all that, we'll be seeing you around.